when a rusting oil tanker called the Brilliante Virtuoso was stormed by armed raiders off the Horn of Africa in July 2011, it caused barely a ripple at the global centre of maritime insurance, Lloyd's of London. The region was notorious after all, with gangs from lawless Somalia attempting to board and hijack ships for ransom every few days. But the attack on the Brillante was unusual. The attackers had decided to set the vessel ablaze and abandon it. For example, there was no demand for money. Much of the $100 million cargo of oil could be recovered. The ship was a wreck, a constructed total loss in the jargon in the insurance industry. But before settling the vast claim from the owner, the Lloyd's syndicate underwriting the ship had to go through a necessary formality. And there was only one man that could send to inspect the burnt out hulk in such a volatile part of the world: the British Marine surveyor, Captain David Mockett. A 65-year-old grandfather and former master mariner in the Merchant Navy, he was a colourful figure. Even with his local connections though, Mockett found it strangely difficult to find a boat willing to take him out to the oil tanker, now drifting 25 miles southeast of the port under the control of a Greek-owned local salvage company. When he finally reached the Brillante, it was clear that it had indeed been a major blaze, yet much else made no sense. It was thought that the fire had been caused by a rocket-propelled grenade, but there was no sign that any had been actually used. Captain Mockett knew that Somali pirates rarely conducted raids after dark, yet these armed men had attacked the ship in the middle of the night. And then there was the strangest question of all: why would the raiders have abandoned such a valuable prize once they had gained control? Though he couldn't be sure what else was going on, Mockett doubted that the pirates were responsible, and making his feelings known, he returned to Aden to write up his findings. But that's where his investigation stopped. On July 20th, 2011, a car bomb exploded under his 4x4, killing him. Nobody has ever been charged with his murder. At first it seemed likely that Lloyd's insurers would pay up for the Brillante, just as insurance syndicates had done in the countless other suspicious losses over the years. But the man heading the team for the Lloyd's syndicate, Paul Cunningham, took a different view. He refused to ignore the death of David Mockett on the many warning signs that are helping him were two stubborn outsiders, former Scotland Yard detective named Richard Veal and Michael Connor, known as Metal Mickey. Sometimes mistaken for an accountant, Veal was a specialist in tracking assets through labyrinths of offshore financial structures. His first job was to find out exactly who owned the Brillante, a question which, even by the standards of international shipping, was opaque. The tanker sailed under the Liberian flag and was registered to a shell company, Suez Fortune, with a postal address in the Marshall Islands. Needless to say, the Filipino crew worked for rotten bottom wages. The insurers had believed it belonged to Top Ships Inc., a Greek company with shares trading on the Nasdaq exchanges in New York. But the actual owner, as Veal then established, was a Greek operator called Marios Lillipoulos, already a well-known figure in certain circles at Lloyd's. "That's the bloke from the Ellie," said Cunningham when he learned the news. The Ellie was a tanker that had run aground off the coast of Yemen in 2009 after a fire in its radio room while being salvaged. It had suffered what experts call catastrophic hogging, with two halves of the ship, bow and stern, each collapsing downwards. Then came two more coincidences. The two ships had employed the same chief engineer on board, and it turned out that the same Greek company, Poseidon Salvage, had attended to both the Ellie and the Brillante when they ran into trouble. And now there was a shared owner of Lillipoulos who had sought insurance payouts of both vessels. Faced with such troubling evidence, the Lloyd's insurers decided not to pay, whereon Lillipoulos, already in apparent financial trouble, sued them in the London courts, the start of a protracted legal battle with millions of pounds at stake. By 2015, the Lloyd's underwriters were worried a court setback had left them liable to pay out as much as $85 billion or £70 million for the wrecked ship. Now they had changed tactics, filing High Court documents which directly accused Lillipoulos of fraud. There was no such attack by the Somali pirates, said the papers. Any such attack of the vessel was staged with the involvement of the owner. According to the underwriters, the captain of the Brillante had ordered the ship to drift and given permission for the supposed pirates to come aboard. Then the chief engineer had been alone with the intruders in the engine room. Lillipoulos, the owner, had been deeply in debt. They argued, giving him a strong incentive to destroy the vessel. The more so as it had been insured at a far excess of its real economic value. In early 2016, Lillipoulos was ordered to testify in person at the High Court, a chance for investigators to come face to face with a man who styled himself Super Mario. He bore no resemblance to the polished operators who generally dominate the top ranks of shipping. Overweight, with long stringy hair and unruly beard, Lillipoulos was known instead for his crude manners and love of racing cars. Few in the rarefied world of Greek shipping have ever been ordered to appear in the foreign court, perhaps why Lillipoulos marched up as a witness box with the swagger of a professional wrestler, his unshaven features twisted to a scowl, untucked shirt stretched over an ample stomach. In the box, he grew steadily more animated, thumping the desk in a display of open hostility, rarely seen in London courtrooms. It did him no good in a written judgment several weeks later. Mr. Justice Flo delivered a scathing assessment of Lillipoulos' testimony, describing him as evasive and non-responsive, and on occasions aggressive and threatening. The judge struck out his demands for the insurance money, and the City of London police arrested Lillipoulos on suspicion of fraud. He was released without charge the same day. With such vast sums at stake, however, the fight continued. Now Piraeus Bank, which had been forced to write off a multi-million-pound loan to Lillipoulos, took over the claim against the insurers in the hope of getting its money back. The investigators still had work to do. For the policy to be clear void, Lloyd's syndicate needed to prove that the ship had not been destroyed through willful misconduct of its owner, and this was far from easy. The following days brought another breakthrough. Lillipoulos' arrest was big news in Greece, and a witness came forward claiming to have vital information, but wanted up to $10 million to talk. Nevertheless, Veal and Connor travelled to Athens to meet him in the city's central plaza. There, in a small conference suite, they introduced to a Greek mariner engineer. More than 6 foot tall, with huge arms, long hair and a rough beard, the man looked like a real version of Bluto from Popeye cartoons. But the story he told was all too plausible. The engineer explained not only had he worked with the owner of the Poseidon Salvage, the Greek-owned firm sent to aid the burning tanker, he had also been sent to buy Kalashnikovs for the attackers to use. He claimed that Poseidon's owner, a man called Vasilos Fergus, had planned the attack in advance with Brillante's owner, and that instead of saving the ship, the salvage crew had helped stoke up the fire on board to ensure the Brillante's total destruction. These were devastating claims. Veal and Connor then found another man who had boarded the Brillante in the aftermath of the hijacking. Like the bearded sailor they met in Athens, this source had worked closely with the salvage master, Vasilos Fergus. The new witness had told the story, which was perhaps the most chilling of all. Clearly terrified, the two detectives turned up on his doorstep. He said he couldn't help them, but Veal and Connor managed to get a court order to obtain a statement he had already given to British police, and it was dynamite. It contained new information about the death of David Mockett. Mockett arrived at the Brillante to survey the damage for his insurers, and had been with the men that Vergos had hosted the surveyor on his salvage barge. Over dinner that evening, Captain Mockett had mentioned his crop of grandchildren who delighted him. In response, Vergos turned to Mockett and asked what he was doing in a dangerous place like the Yemen. For a man your age, it's better to stay with your grandchildren, Vergos said. Mockett was clearly perplexed by the case, and within earshot of many aboard, the Briton remarked that he'd seen no evidence of a strike of a rocket-propelled grenade, and no sign of the supposed pirates firing the weapons on the tanker. Everyone could see on the face that he was not happy about what he had seen or what he'd been told. He was shocked days afterwards to discover that Captain Mockett had been killed, and called Vergos to tell him about the bombing. Yet it seemed that the Greek salvage expert already knew, saying I told him to stay with his grandchildren. Vergos had denied the advanced knowledge of Mockett's death, and and accused the witness of fabricating allegations against him. Lillopoulos has also denied wrongdoing. Neither has been charged in connection with the killing. The Brillante's case finally came to court in February 2019 and continued for 52 days, many of them taken up with cross-examination of technical specialists. 8 months later, the legal teams returned to hear the judge, Mr. Justice Tiers, hand down his damning verdict in 130 pages. He concluded the ship was indeed wrecked as a result of fraud. The orchestrator of those events was the owner of the Brilliante Virtuoso, Mr. Lillopoulos. The captain and the engineer assisted the armed men with their task and were key players in the conspiracy to which Virgos was a party. After he read the judgment, Connor called David Mockett's widow, Cynthia, to break the news. It was the closest Cynthia had to a validation of her husband's life and death, and maybe the closest she would ever come. David was right, she said through her tears. I knew he was right.